Hello, class. I wanted to thank you so much for your effort in this American government class. Go over a few points on foreign policy for this week, and then just do a quick recap in terms of my expectations for the final, where you'll find the final, what the deadlines are, and how you might reach me in case you have any questions, concerns during this final week. So quick recap. I have the final for the class posted on Moodle, and today is August the 10th, so it's available from today. You have until the 16th of August at midnight to make sure you have that posted on Moodle. The exam itself is 30 minutes, and it'll consist of a mixture of multiple choice and true false answers. So again, that will be due on Sunday the 16th at midnight. So today's topic is on foreign policy, US foreign policy, and mainly thinking about US foreign policy. It has three main goals: issues of national security, establishing free and open international trade. That is a major advantage to US foreign policy in terms of our balance of trade and our balance of payments. The more trade the US does abroad, the better it is for the economy, because when US dollars are circulating broadly around the economy, that stimulates the global economy, which stimulates demand, which increases the volume of exports from the United States. In other words, other countries request more goods and services from the United States. So that's very beneficial to the US economy in that context. An establishment of US foreign policy. Number three is establishing international or world peace. One of the key instruments of doing this is the United Nations, specifically Chapter 7 of the UN Charter, which provides for the Security Council of the United Nations to act in the event that there is a threat to international peace. That might be a non-state actor like Al-Qaeda or ISIS or Al-Shabaab, Abu Sayyaf, Boko Haram, the Zetas, Sinaloa gangs, and so on. These non-state actors that challenge international peace through drug trafficking, through human trafficking, through international terrorism. But the third goal is also very much related to the second goal, in the context that establishing world peace allows for establishing free and open trade. Countries cannot trade with each other in an environment of chaos, of war, and of crisis. Free and open trade does best under conditions of peace. That way, people are able to engage in the exchange of goods and services. National governments are able to generate revenue and provide for the public goods that citizens require and demand. Fourth goal of US foreign policy is supporting democracy. I know on this fourth point there is a lot of inconsistency, but very broadly, this is one of the fundamental US ideals. The US has two broad elements to its foreign policy. One is its national interests, but the other is its ideals. In other words, as much as the US advances its foreign policy based on its national interests, its core interests, meaning its national security, its trade interests, its intelligence interests, but there are fundamental values about human rights, about respect for the rights of minorities, democratic institutions, and so on, that the US espouses around the world. Isn't always consistent, but it is one of the goals of US foreign policy. And then fifthly, providing aid to people in need in terms of humanitarian aid and intervention. How is U.S. foreign policy applied? Very broadly, you have the isolationist school, which is more introspective, more introverted, in the context that the isolationism school wants the U.S. to abandon all international engagements, to focus only on domestic affairs. And then there's the opposite school, which is the internationalist school, which takes a position that the U.S. has to be engaged in international affairs. So take a quick look in terms of the realist and the idealist perspective. Realism is a perspective of international affairs that emphasizes perceived threats to U.S. security interests. Idealism, on the other hand, is a view of the world where the U.S. considers the interests of other nations, defense of human rights, and favor alliances. In other words, a realist school focusing on core U.S. interests, America first sort of thinking, American interests above all. Idealist thinking with a perspective that yes, U.S. should pursue its interests, but in doing that, should also consider the interests of other countries, should emphasize cooperation between countries rather than conflict. What are some of the tools of foreign policy? You have diplomatic tools, economic tools, military tools. Take a look at those when you have a chance. Foreign policy makers, obviously the head of U.S. foreign policy making in the context of the U.S. is the U.S. president. You also have the National Security Council, and this is led by the National Security Advisor, and it's a collection of security experts who are part of the White House staff. You have your Department of State, you have your Department of Defense, you also have your Department of Homeland Security. In addition to this, you have your various intelligence agencies, including the National Security Agency, the CIA, the DIA, the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force intelligence wings. U.S. foreign policy concerns center around 5 broad themes: one of terrorism, one of nuclear proliferation. This is the idea of conventional nuclear weapons, or nuclear weapons spreading to many other countries outside the traditional nuclear powers. Countries like Iran getting nuclear weapons, countries like Iraq getting nuclear weapons, countries like North Korea getting nuclear weapons. In other words, thinking about the U.S. concern that nuclear weapons will spread very broadly around the world, and this will be a threat to core U.S. interests. And then issues of free trade. Those are very important, as I've mentioned before, because the U.S. needs to advance its interests. Global trade is critical to U.S. national security. Countries need to trade, countries need to exchange goods and services. It enhances international cooperation, it enhances global trade, but it also proliferates the use of the US dollar as the de facto currency for international trade. That's very important and very powerful. So when you have the dollar circulating in trade between, say, Nigeria and Turkey, or the US dollar being used in trade between India and Russia, that really creates significant leverage for the United States, because those dollar bills are printed in the United States. And as a result of that, the US has tremendous influence in terms of global money supplies, in terms of enforcement of sanctions to its enemies, and also rewarding its friends through generous loan concessions, grants, aid packages, and so on. Also humanitarian concerns. So when you think, for example, of the humanitarian crisis we had in Syria, humanitarian crisis we had in Iraq, the humanitarian crisis we had in places like Somalia, Cambodia, all these are areas of human suffering. So by virtue of the US foreign policy not only being centered on its interests, but also its ideals, there is a space there for this argument of humanitarianism, and not only humanitarianism, but humanitarian intervention. So, for example, when Yazidis are being massacred in Syria, right? What is the role, or what is the place of the United States in terms of intervening to alleviate this human suffering? When the Rohingya are being persecuted in Burma, what is the U.S. government's place in terms of relieving those people of that suffering? When the Bosnian Muslims were being massacred by the Serbs in the former Yugoslavia, what is the role of the United States in alleviating that problem? In Rwanda, when the Tutsis were being massacred by the Hutus, what is the role of the United States within this broad framework? So think about those things. And then lastly, I'd like to highlight a few things in terms of our class. This is week 7, August 10th through the 14th. I posted from last week the weekly lecture on the economy. Please take a look at that. If you haven't already, if you click on the icon there, it automatically, I put a hyperlink there. It'll take you right to the lecture. Your final is available again under week 7, August 10th through the 14th. Again, the final is due on August 16th by midnight, and the final is posted right there under week 7. So feel free to email me should you have any questions or concerns. I did get your reflection assignments yesterday, and I will be grading them and posting your grades today before 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So look out for that. I'll have your grades and your grade book, and I'll give you feedback via email. And again, thank you so much for your effort in this class and for your time in going through the materials, going through the readings. Remember again to make sure you complete that final by August 16th. The final will be under the week 7 icon, and it is right there. Again, feel free to email me at dmonda01@manhattan.edu. I trust you are keeping safe and well, and I look forward to receiving your finals and completing the course later this week. Thank you again. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me.